Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Hello Awesome podcast. My guest today is a pastor's wife, a homeschooling mama, singer, songwriter, Sister Angie Pearson. You may recognize her as one of the dynamic praise singers during NAYC this year at Lucas Anointing Oil Stadium. Sister Angie, thank you so much for being here today. Can you please share with us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to be with you today and to talk about my experience there. I am, like you said, a pastor's wife out of Kentucky. I'm born and raised in Kentucky, spent most of my time there. My husband and I have been pastoring in Winchester, Kentucky for the last 7 years. And I've been writing songs for years, been singing for years, leading worship for events in Kentucky for probably 25 years at this point. And but I actually never recorded as a solo artist until it was actually in 2020 that I started recording and started releasing music in 2021 and released another 4 songs. So I have 8 songs out total. So in 2021, I released 4, and in 2023 into 24, I released 4 more songs. And one of those songs is the one that most people will recognize. I'll Sing About Jesus. I released that in September of 23. I ended up leading it at a General Conference service that year at General Conference. We added a cool shout tag on the end of it. And then Indiana Bible College actually from that conference took that and recorded it and has really given it much more of a global reach. And so a lot of people have heard that. And so I'm just ministering away here in Kentucky with homeschooling, Bible quizzing, pastoring, writing songs, and recording as God makes those things available. So that's who I am.
I am just so encouraged by that because as somebody who I'm not musically inclined as far as instruments, but I have all the words. And there has been songs that the Lord has placed on my heart, and it just seems like not right now. So,
Mm.
just quick question. How many times have you felt like the Lord had given you a song and it's just you kind of felt that like, oh, I don't have the resources right now to share it?
That's kind of my whole story, honestly, because I started writing songs at a very young age. And I don't think I never had an experience where I felt like God called me to songwriting, but it was so inherent in just who I was that I remember when I had a moment where I began to question that call. And it was like soul shaking, like, wait, am I not supposed to do this? So I always felt like it was just part of who I was to write songs. But then how do you take a song that you've written and do the thing with it that's supposed to happen with it? So I made several attempts to record, and I never really cared about singing other songs. Again, I think I'm a songwriter primarily over a singer. I wasn't really worried about singing anything else. I just wanted to sing the songs that I'd written. I wanted them to get out there, wanted people to hear those. And I felt very much that that's what God wanted me to do. And I always needed a producer. I just didn't know that's what I needed was a producer. So I made several attempts to record throughout my 30s. And I joke that every time I started getting serious about recording, I would get pregnant. And so there were a couple of times that I was like, oh, I'm really going to do this. And then oh no, I'm going to have a baby. That's what I'm going to do right now. And I had set a deadline for myself. I don't know why, but I had set this mental deadline that I'm going to record by the time I'm 40. And then when 40 came, I thought, okay, well, that's it. Then I'm not going to do that. And then of course, I, I had this, I had this moment where I said, God, what you have given me to do is enough for me. As far as I'm content. I'm content with the assignments that you've put in my hand. I'm a mother. I'm a pastor's wife. We're building something beautiful here. And I don't have any other ambition. I have no other ambitions. This is beautiful. What you've given me is enough. I was so content. And then it's like, okay, the door opened and a friend of mine said, you need to record and this is who you need to call. And so I finally had the missing piece for me, which was a producer. I will say though, throughout, my 20s and my 30s, I would feel there were times that I would be a music director somewhere and I would write a song and we would use those songs like in a church service So there was some traction as far as being used. I used some songs at Kentucky camp. I was making small steps, say, in utilizing that. I always felt this deep sense of conviction. I would literally lay awake at night and think, God, I don't want to stand before you having not done the thing that you wanted me to do. And it would always be the songs that you were supposed to share. Like that's what would grip me is I'm supposed to be doing something with these songs. And so that conviction propelled me that, okay, finally, after the age of 40, now I've recorded. So
Well,
finally did the thing.
thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that. That's very encouraging, especially for somebody like myself. And hopefully people out there too, realizing that, the dream isn't always over when you think it's
right,
over.
right.
God is leading you, and what you're going through right now is just kind of the stepping stones to eventually get there. And it
Absolutely.
just may not be the season to see it come to fruition right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And God, He is good in all of His ways and in the doors that He opens and the doors that He closes. And a lot of times, these seasons where we're wrestling with what we're supposed to do is really preparation for when God does open that. You're primed and you're ready for that opportunity. So I feel like that's what happened for me.
Absolutely. I did want to dive into how you prepared for an event. You're talking about, are helping at conferences, at your church. NAYC is on an insanely different scale. Um,
Absolutely.
and also going along with the theme called, which I thought was beautiful, what God
Yeah.
showed you, which is kind of what you're talking about
I
already.
know. I know.
um, as you stepped out in faith to follow the call. So, uh, can you please share with us, I guess, in a nutshell, what is NAYC? People probably have been hearing about it and they don't know what it means, what it stands for, and how did you get involved this year?
So NAYC, it stands for North American Youth Congress, and it is an event put on every 2 years by the United Pentecostal Church International, by the Youth Ministries Department is who puts on this event. And it is geared for youth, it's geared for young people, but I find it's for everyone. It is it's the premier event, the most well-attended event that we have in our ministerial organization, and it's gotten to the point where it has to be hosted in stadiums because of the size. We had over 36,000 people registered this year, which is just mind blowing. And the magnitude of being able to worship God in that type of setting with that many other apostolic believers is just tremendous. There's no other experience like that. So, like I said, it is what we consider the premier event. And so I've asked myself the question many times, how in the world did I get to be involved in this? Especially, I've done a lot of youth events over the years, but I kind of felt like I was really moving out of that season of my life. As being in my 40s now, being involved in any type of major youth event. When I got the call, and the call came from a dear friend of mine, Brandon Cowden, who was chosen to be the music coordinator for NAYC. Um, we have worked together for many years. He's originally from Kentucky as well. And he actually started playing for me for some youth camps that I was doing, I think around the age of 17 years old. He started playing for me. So we've worked together in many, many different settings, many, many different events. And so we have a relationship that has really grown throughout leading worship and coordinating music for these types of events together. And he's actually the one who has always pushed me to record and made the phone call to me and said, "You need to record now, and this is the guy you need to call." So he's been a voice of influence in my life to lead me to what I'm doing now. So he called and he said, "What are you doing in July of 2025?" And I said, "Well, I guess whatever you're getting ready to ask me to do. What is it?" And he said, "How would you like to lead worship at NAYC?" And I'm like, "Are you serious? Is this a real conversation that we're having?" And I think on paper, it honestly doesn't make sense. I'm not the most well known. Again, I'm pastoring here in, a smaller growing church in Kentucky. I don't travel, I don't tour, I don't do a lot of those things. I take very minimal engagements outside of our church and family calendar. So I do have music out, and God has done incredible things through some of those songs. A couple of those songs, like I mentioned, have been recorded by Indiana Bible College, but it really didn't make sense on paper for me to be there. But God really worked in me to let me know that He had me there for a purpose. And so that's how I got involved. And I felt like my role on the team, I was actually the oldest member of the team, both musicians and singers. And I was also the only pastor's wife on the team. And I felt like God told me that is exactly the role that you're playing here. You're bringing a level of spiritual authority. And I felt like that was released in that very first worship service, that there was authority and spiritual dominion in NAYC. And not that there hasn't been in years past, absolutely not saying that at all, but there was a release of it that I think came from just there being a level of authority on the team. And so that's how I ended up there. What an experience it was.
I would agree. I think from the first note, there was a shift in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Um, because I was there and we went with our youth group. Shout out Apostolic Youth of Enfield. Um, and yeah, we went with our youth group and my family. And it was a few of our first time. It was my first time. It was my son's first time, both my sons, and a couple other kids too. Um, and we just kept hearing from those who had went before, like, it's going to be different. It's just going to be different. It's just going to be different. And there's no amount of preparation when you see
Right.
over 30,000 people worshiping, singing to the Lord together in a place like that, united in the Holy Ghost.
Right.
It's there's nothing like it. It truly gives you a glimpse of what heaven would be like. And
Absolutely.
I do agree with you that from that first note, from that first worship session, it like set the tone for everything after that. And I
Yeah.
think that's why it's important for us to pray and to really seek God for who to place on the microphone.
Yeah. Right.
And people have talent, and we know lots of people who have talent, but that doesn't mean that they probably would be the right person for this type of event.
Right.
And that's not a shade to them at all. It just means maybe
Right.
there's a spiritual maturity there that's they're not
Right.
ready for it. Um, so for me as a creative person, I was at NAYC, but I couldn't take it. I couldn't help but see the magnitude of like
Yeah.
preparation. I'm looking
Right.
at it from a creative standpoint of like, look at this size, look at what they would have to order, all of
Right.
the
Right.
equipment, and that's just how my brain goes. Um, so like knowing that you were going to be part of the core worship team each night, was there anything that you did off stage to prepare yourself for that?
This is such a great question. I'm going to be very transparent because I saw my preparation for the event going much differently than it did. Um, and and I think this was something that God was reminding me of, because I mean, I had all of these like goals. I'm going to fast so many days. I'm going to pray so many hours. I'm going to do all these things. And prayer and fasting is absolutely necessary. So I'm not saying those things are not necessary. They are. But the Lord had to remind me at some point that I could not prepare for this in my own strength. So my tendency would be like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to fast so many days. I'm going to do all this. And there was still an element in that of me trying to do it in my own strength. And so many things came at us. When I tell you the attack of the enemy over the last year, I found out April of last year that I was going to be part of the team. And so there was this, I feel like there was a low hum in the background for a year and a half almost of this is coming up, just that sense of responsibility that this is coming up. And so I kept thinking, okay, when we get through this, I'm going to really just put all my focus on NAYC. And that moment never happened. So as me being transparent, I felt like I never was able to say, okay, I'm, pushing pause on everything else until we got there. There were moments, just, there was a beautiful season that God gave me once I got on site. But what I think God was teaching me was two things. One, I was not going to be able to rely on my own preparation. I was learning songs. We were talking about set lists. I mean, we started making lists of songs back in January. Like we were doing all those things, but the spiritual preparation, which I felt was my role, I felt my role was very much imparting something spiritually. Um, that I was not going to be able to do that in my own strength. I was going to have to really depend on him to do that. And not just the reliance on him, but also the reliance on what I'd already prepared in my life. Because I think it's one thing to be given an opportunity. And of course, there's going to be logistics that you're going to prepare, set list and learning parts and, all of the things that we can coordinate on our own. But when something is going to spiritually happen in a service, when something is imparted, when there is authority there, that's not something that you just develop after you've been given the opportunity. You have to already be developing that. And I felt like I pulled from years of prayer toward not this moment specifically, but prayerful preparation and, extended fast, even that I've done in the past, where I felt like God was saying, you've already prepared for this. And you've already done that. And now just let me show up and give you what you need. And now once we got there and I went up, we were actually there for like 9 days total. By the time the event was over, everybody's just getting there on Wednesday when it's starting. And we're like, we've actually been here for a while. So I got there on Thursday before NAYC and I went without my family at first. And I'm glad I did that because it gave me those moments in the hotel room after we'd been rehearsing. I took a journal, had my Bible out. I'm writing out Psalms. I'm writing out prayers and things that I wanted to pray over. And I feel like those were the moments that God was like, okay, you're ready. You're ready. You've prepared for this. All those years of preparation, what I'm giving you that you can't check off a checklist, what I'm imparting to you. And then these moments here. And I felt like God really met me Tuesday morning before it began. I woke up, my alarm went off and I pushed snooze because I just didn't feel ready to get up. But I'm laying there half asleep and God gives me a vision in my mind of Wednesday night of me standing up there and releasing deliverance into the atmosphere. And I could hear myself saying the things that I end up saying between I know a name and take control. There was a moment there where I took liberty to release those things into the atmosphere. But I had dreamed that, like, we're not dreamed it, but like I was half asleep and saw a vision of it early Tuesday morning. And the power of God, it just hit me so strong. I got up and I'm just walking around the room, speaking in tongues and receiving it, what God was imparting into my spirit. And I knew there was going to come a moment when I would release that. And I felt like that was my godly assignment, was to release that. And then Wednesday night, everything fell together. And they said, there's a moment right here. There's a space right here. And I said, I already know what God has given me to release. And so I was prepared for it. So to answer the question about preparation, I'll be honest, it didn't go the way I wanted it to go, but I learned so much about how God does things. And he prepared me absolutely.
I love that you share that though, because it is real. It's honest.
Yeah,
And I think we tend to forget that, if we are walking with God daily, He is preparing us for the future things that we don't even
right,
know about.
right.
And so, yes, we should put some time aside and, kind of prepare here and there. But yeah, we tend to think of like, ooh, I need a 3 hour block of prayer time for this. And,
Right, right,
if you can do that, sure. If God actually calls you to do that, sure. But if you're daily reading your word, if you're praying to Him daily, you're talking to Him every day, and you're obedient in everything
yeah,
that He calls you to do outside of this big thing,
right,
because it's all big to God. It all matters.
right,
And
right.
I think that actually is just such a underrated thing that we don't talk about enough.
Yeah, yeah. And
And
if I could even add on to that, we had some beautiful prayer meetings, powerful prayer meetings behind the scenes, like in rehearsal. Our rehearsal on Saturday um, turned into just this incredible prayer meeting. And I mean, so God was moving powerfully behind the scenes. And in one of those, the last prayer meeting that we had, I think on Friday, actually Friday before the service, we had we were going to rehearse the song, whatever, but we ended up just praying. And during that time, we were sort of sharing some things for the team to be ready moving out of this season. And one of the things that was shared, which is so true, is, this experience is not the pinnacle of your ministry. It's not. It's a great event. It's a powerful event, but it's not the pinnacle. The real ministry that we're doing is what we're doing in our local churches, in our neighborhoods, with our families. Like, that's the real pinnacle, is the day in and day out of what you're doing on a consistent basis, how God is working through you. And I'm so grateful I got to be part of this event where, I mean, thousands of lives were touched. And I feel very much like I completed my assignment that God had for me to do. And obedience has always been my big thing. God, you give me something to do. I want to be obedient with what you've handed me to do. Um, but that's not the pinnacle. It's the daily obedience. It's the daily preparation. And, I felt like, oh God, you've given me this amazing opportunity. I want to steward it well. And that's absolutely true. I wanted to steward it well. And if I could go back and do some things differently, I probably would, in just stewarding that. But what God kept reminding me is, I didn't choose you for this so that you could prepare for it. I chose you because you were prepared for it. So, and that's only through his spirit. That's only through his blessing. That's only through what he can do in us. So I'm just
Right.
grateful that the moments when they came, I was prepared because God had given me what I needed.
Absolutely. You worded that very well. And it reminds me of when, I had felt the call to preach. Well, I had just been in the church like what, 6 months,
Yeah,
which may not matter, but I wasn't ready for that at the
right.
time. Looking back, I'm glad I did not have a microphone in my hand. Um, but it took about a decade, and then I felt the Lord want me to start this podcast to learn that ministry isn't just about talking; it's also about
Absolutely.
listening
Right.
and talk like giving people a platform to share their stories, their
Yeah,
heart, being a better communicator, and to do it in a way that's just different off the platform. And so, you
right.
know, the Lord used this podcast to help me learn how to craft even sermon notes of like, oh, I know how
Right.
many pages. If I write four
Yes.
pages, I know how much time that is. Like
Yeah,
things like that. But I wasn't prepping for a pulpit. I was prepping for an interview. Um,
absolutely. And
and
yet God was preparing you to minister. Yeah.
Yeah, and even when we teach people Bible studies and we love that, you know, God's teaching us how to teach our children these
Yeah.
stories. And
Yeah.
I'm finding that we're talking about a lot of hot button topics now at our table, and I'm sure you guys are as well.
Yes. Yes.
Because I'd rather them learn from us, at home
Absolutely.
than outside. And I'm realizing these are conversations I've had with people I was trying to minister the gospel to. And I still
Yeah.
am doing that, but they're my kids. So
Right.
God uses everything. He really doesn't waste anything.
He does not waste anything. That is so true. There's no experience, positive or negative, that is wasted. He has a way of, even mistakes that we've made, he has a way of teaching us and revealing in us and just growing us, maturing us through the process. So he does not waste anything. That's absolutely true.
Um, so how important is it, in your opinion, for worship leaders in general to prepare themselves before stepping to the mic? I know we talked a little bit about like what preparation looked at like for you, but in general, if there's anything practical that you think, or even spiritually, how important is it for worship leaders to actually like prepare before they hold that microphone?
It's so important. And I'll speak to a couple of practical things, but I'll start with the spiritual aspect of it. So when we're leading in worship, that's really an outflow of our experience with God. And we're trying to bring people along, but if we're not connected with Jesus, then we don't have anywhere to take people, and then our leadership becomes very shallow. We're just trying to lead for response. But I think that the depth of our experience with God is the place that we really have to tap into to lead people in worship. And that there's no shortcut to that. That is prayer and fasting. I know I talked about I didn't get to do all those things, but because I have a well dug of prayer and fasting in my life already, like that is a place for me to pull from, even if maybe, oh, I didn't pray an hour today in preparation for this. There's a well of the Spirit in my life because of those times where I wasn't just saying, oh, I'm going to do this so that I'm ready to lead. No, it was a time of me saying, no, I want to know Jesus and I want to experience him. And, there are seasons in my life where I've made it a priority just to stand at the keyboard and play and sing for nobody but the Lord. And we have to have those moments that becomes, it feels to me like there's a well that I can pull from because of the time that I've spent in the presence of God. So that spiritual aspect has to be there. And also spiritual authority has to be there. And I don't want to dig too deep into this. I did talk about it on another podcast somewhat a couple of weeks ago with Rachel French. So you can check out that podcast about this. But I battled with the spirit of heaviness at one point, and I felt in a worship service when I was underneath the weight of that spirit of heaviness, I felt it impact the entire congregation. And so I think what's important for worship leaders to know is that the victory that you walk in, you're transmitting, but also the bondage that you have, you're also transmitting that. And so it's important. You have to be walking in victory in order to be able to really lead people effectively. And so the spiritual component is so important, not preparing to lead, but just spending time with the Lord. The motive has to be that you just want to know him, you just want to be with him. And then what flows out of that is going to be leadership. So that's part of it. But then there's also the practical aspects of it. It's really hard to lead spiritually a song that you don't know very well. So you just have to put the time in to really know your material. If you're leading a group of people, you have to know it 10 times better than they do. You've got to just put the time in. I lead from the keyboard at my church. And so if I'm lost on how to play a song, that's going to affect my ability to lead. So those are things that you just have to put the time in and get out of the way. You need to know what you're doing on your instrument if you're leading from an instrument. You need to know what the parts of the song are. You need to just be ready to where it's almost muscle memory and second nature so that you can really tap into what's happening spiritually in the atmosphere and lead from there. So practically from a worship leading standpoint, there's no shortcut to just knowing the material really well so that you don't have to think about what you're doing as much and you can really tap into what God is doing in that service.
Right, that's very true. All great points, especially the knowing your material.
Yeah,
I think we get
yes,
so quick of like, ooh, a new song, and then jump into
right,
the new song, and we're like, probably should have waited just a tad bit till we were
right.
a little bit seasoned on it. Because I think we just anticipate that the Holy Ghost is going to meet us and miraculously impute it into our brain.
Right, right,
And that can happen, but I feel like that's also tempting the Lord. So, uh,
right. It's a little bit lazy on our part, I think, to be like, oh, I'm
mm,
going to get up and I only know this song halfway. And there may be a time that God says, okay, you need to do this song. You're like, not ready, Lord. It's not an
sure.
excuse, I think, to just hold back, but I think it is really just an encouragement to we need to step up prepared with material so that we're able, to not have to just have our brain be stuck in the details and logistics of the song, but we can move beyond that and really worship. It takes a while. I tell my team that by the time the congregation has really learned the song well enough to worship to it, we're tired of it. We're sick of it.
Yeah,
But
it's
we have to
true.
keep singing it. We have to keep singing it because they are just now
True.
to the point where they're able to worship along to it, because of having to learn it to a
Right.
certain level before you can really worship. So anyway,
Lots of patience. Yeah.
yes.
So if you could give praise singers or aspiring worship leaders or those who are already in those positions one piece of advice, I know that's kind of a loaded question, but if you could, what would you tell them?
So I would tell them to serve the Lord with gladness right where they are. And we actually, there was a group of us talking about this at NAYC. We had a great conversation. And, I have, God gave me specifically out of his word when I was about 21 years old. He told me something that he had called me to do. But up until that point, I had only ever really just felt a call to serve. Whatever the need is, I'll do that. And, I grew up in a church plant. So I was doing puppet ministry at 12. I was playing for altar at 10. I was leading worship at 14, not because I was great at any of those things, but because there was a need. And so the need, just serving, the call to serve. And sometimes with praise singers, with aspiring worship leaders, they may have a vision for what they think God is going to do through them. And he may very well be calling them to that particular thing. But you rarely just wake up with those opportunities handed to you. And I think the most important thing is to serve what opportunities that you have with excellence, with all that you have. I was given some opportunities in my younger 20s to lead at Kentucky Youth Camp, but I can guarantee you those opportunities came to me because every time the music was happening, I was 110% in worshiping. Any opportunity I got to sing in the choir, I was there. I was not holding out for like the golden ticket. I wasn't saying, wait, when they asked me to do the thing I feel called to do, that's what I was going to do. No, I was 100% in with every opportunity that I had, even if that was just leading in the congregation. And I will say, I feel called to be a worship leader no matter where I am. If that means I'm in front of 36,000 people at NAYC, I will do that. But if that means I'm worshiping in the congregation at a small event, I'm going to be leading there just in my example and in my connection to the service. I feel like that is what God has given me to do. And so I'm going to do that no matter if I'm on a platform, sitting in a pew, wherever. So if you feel like you're called to sing, sing with excellence wherever. If you feel like you're called to lead, lead with excellence wherever you are. And then God's going to open those doors for whatever is ahead for you. So I would say, yeah, if okay, I need to get better at, maybe I need to learn an instrument, we'll do that. Um, Maybe I need to learn how to teach parts. Okay, you can work on that. And those are things that you can prepare yourself to do. But more than anything is your attitude to just serve with excellence with whatever is given to you. And I never once had to say, hey, you know what? You should ask me to do this. I never had to go pushing, like elbowing my way into an opportunity. I never, ever had to do that. God was always like handing me opportunities. I'm like, are you sure, Lord, that I can do that? And yes, you can. So because I was just serving with excellence and with passion and with everything I had, wherever God had opened up for me to serve. So that's my advice for those people.
That's very good. And that can go so far. Just be a servant first in
Yeah,
everything that you do, truly. I mean, love God first, love others. That's
yeah,
really what our main calling is to do that.
yeah.
And then everything else is just bonus.
Right, right. And I think that if you make serving your call, you're never going to be, there's always going to be something to do. There's always going to be a way that you can serve in the kingdom. You're never out of a job or out of a position or whatever however you might think about that. You're never without purpose because there's always a place to serve, always a place to serve. So I
Mhm.
joke at my church, right now, again, I said we're a growing church. My husband, the pastor, is on the drums. I'm on the keys. I've got another young lady who's learning how to play. She's not there yet. I'm training a bass player, although I don't play the bass. I'm doing the best I can, teaching him. But my goal is to train my way out of a job, and then you know what? I'll find something else to do. If all the positions are filled, if I've got all the singers and musicians that I need, if I've got people leading and they don't need me to do that anymore, I will find a way to serve, whether it's media, whether it's holding crying babies, whether whatever it is, I will find a way to serve because that's my calling. My calling isn't a platform. My calling isn't a position. My calling is to serve. And whatever God has put in my hands to do, then that's what I'm going to do.
I mean, absolutely. And I really do think that it was just such a beautiful, just testament to God's like, he's just so good. He just his mercy and just his grace of leading those who put together NAYC this year with the theme called, because I
Yes.
think I just there was been so many things over the last couple months that have kind of like highlighted that for me in particular personally. And I know he could do that for all of us at the same time. But it was just such a beautiful message overall each
Yeah.
day. Um, what God had given every minister, what God had given every, praise singer, along those lines. It was just such just a time of worship and praise, and just listening to the different scriptures that one preacher would say, and it
Yeah.
would just marry the other message,
Everything
and
was like
just
layers
it was
upon layers. Right.
only God could do that. And
Right.
so I wanted to know what has been something that God has taught you as you've stepped out in faith to follow the call in your life.
I think the biggest thing is that he is going to equip you. If God gives you opportunity to serve in a certain capacity, it will probably challenge you. There's not one thing that God is ever going to ask us to do that feels really comfortable. I just don't think that he's worried about our comfort level. And I think that he likes to push us and challenge us and cause us to grow, cause us to mature. But he's not going to leave us by ourselves. And so that is, especially for self reliant people, people who are used to being capable and getting things done, I think he's going to purposefully put you in an opportunity that is going to require more than you have to give. And so that he can say, I got you, right? And he can be the strength that you need, and he can be the creativity that you need, and he can give you wisdom. And I do think that's a prayer that the church needs to learn how to pray a lot more is God give me wisdom. We really like for him to just come and make a way or to come and do a miracle or to come and heal things, but sometimes he wants us to do it with his wisdom. And so we just need to pray for wisdom. And I think that he's taught me that he's going to show up. And I'm going to share. I'm I should have looked up the reference for this, but I didn't think about this verse. I think it's Psalm 138, verse 8. I think that's the psalm that it is. And it has become one of my life verses that I repeat to myself over and over. The Lord will perfect that which concerneth me. The Lord will perfect that which concerneth me. So I think when you are called and God begins to open doors, sometimes you start to get like focused on opportunities that could happen or things that could come. And maybe other people are getting opportunities that you thought you should be getting, or maybe doors are opening for somebody else. But I've just always found such peace in if it's for me, God's going to perfect it. If it's for me to do, He's going to help me. If that's where I'm supposed to be, then God's going to take care of that. And so I think just knowing and resting in the fact that He's going to equip you, He's going to open the right door. We don't have to strive, like clawing our way to something. We may have to strive with ourselves, okay, and against our flesh. But His yoke is easy, His burden is light. I hope I'm making sense with this and just saying, I think there's rest in it. God's going to put you in some challenging situations, but you can rest in Him, and He's going to help you do it.
Uh, Thank you for confirming my next message. I'm just
Okay,
saying,
good.
um, yes, it was called The Sword and the Yoke. But that is just so gosh, God's word is so beautiful. Even when it's hard and it hurts, there's so much beauty
Yes,
in that
yes,
because we're stripping ourselves of that flesh, of that human nature, and we're really following after him. We're taking up our cross, and we're obedient to him, and we may not know, where it leads, but if we're following him, he knows anyway. We
right,
can just
right.
our it's like a child in the snow, they put their feet where your feet were in the
Yeah,
snow.
yeah,
And that's how I just picture it. He's the fact that our God even has done anything for us.
Right.
He doesn't have to do anything. But
Right.
then he tells us that we can take his yoke
Yes.
and that he will relieve us of the
Yeah.
heaviness. That
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
shows how love like how he is love.
Yes.
Um
Yes.
and it really gives you a glimpse of his heart in the bigger picture. And I think we sometimes forget that because sometimes it's hard. Sometimes the days um, just string together and we just go with
Right.
the flow as best as we can.
Right.
Sometimes we're hanging on a prayer or thread or whatever, you know, barely on the straight and narrow path. Um, but he's just so calm and
Yes.
patient and
He's
loving.
rest, he's peace, he's just yeah.
Yeah.
When I'm anxious, oh, I'm gonna share some song lyrics. I've not released this song. I haven't recorded this song. But it's gonna happen at some point. But um the it's a song from the psalm that says praise waited for thee in Zion, which is really stillness praises him. And I'm not gonna go into all that, but the
Yeah.
song lyric, my hurry doesn't praise you.
Mm,
My hurry doesn't praise you. My worry doesn't trust you. So when I'm hurried and I'm worried, like those are places where God is absent.
right.
I'm trying to do it. I'm striving to do it. I'm trying to make it happen. And yeah, there's, you know what? Sometimes you gotta, I get it. There's going to be moments, especially as a mom, you got to hurry up and get this done and hurry up and get this done. But
Right.
I have found that Proverbs chapter 3, trust in the Lord with all thine might and lean not unto thine own understanding. For most of my life, I interpreted that as we can trust God in the moments that we don't understand. That's not what it says. It says, trust in the Lord with all thy might and lean not unto thine own understanding. The moments that we do have understanding, we are still to trust him. The things that we do have
Yeah.
figured out, we still need to trust him. Those are places. So I've even started, as a pastor's wife, I have a lot of events that I have to plan. I've started like praying over the church dinners, like, okay, God, you tell me, like how much, what do we need to do for this? How do I need to plan that? I mean, I can figure that out on my own, but he's so much, I can just trust him. He's so much better at this than I am. And so I
Mhm.
just like, you know what, I know what I'm doing to a certain extent, but when I turn it over to him and let him lead me, even in the places that I have understanding, that means everything I'm doing. I'm giving it to him, I'm trusting him, and I'm resting in him.
Right.
And so I've started like, okay, God, if there's something I'm supposed to be doing, you let me know because my mind's blank right now. I've brain fog or whatever. I've forgotten what I need to do right now, God. So if there's something I need to do, tell me. And
Hmm.
he's so good at that. So I don't know if I went off on a tangent there or not, but I just, our trust in him, we can rest in him. We can trust in him.
Yeah.
His yoke is easy. It's so
It
easy.
it's so easy. And there was a phrase that that's been resonating in my head of and the Lord's been telling me, and sometimes it's like whether it's song lyrics or message or whatever, it's 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 a temptation to have that separate from what we're going through, even though God's trying to teach us in
Right.
that moment before we bring it forth to other people. And the phrase put down the sword has been crazy in my like
Yeah.
alarm in my
Yeah.
mind, even in the moments where I literally am like, I'm double fisting two swords, double wielding, as they
Yeah.
say. And the Lord reminded me of Peter and how in his own understanding he thought he
Mm.
can defend the Lord and he cut the ear off of the soldier. And Jesus healed it back.
Yeah.
That would
Yeah.
never be us. That would
Yeah.
never be us. And then he turns to Peter and he tells him to basically remember what I've been telling you
Yeah.
in a nutshell. And it's like, wow, in his own understanding, he thought he was doing something righteous, and he
Right.
wasn't at all. And in fact, he was doing something opposite of what God wanted him to do. And it just reminds me of what you said of just, we have to truly not lean on our own understanding,
Right.
especially when it comes to the call of God. And I think we could tie it in there, sometimes we think something's a calling or a dream and it's really not. and we have these talents and we have these desires, and there's nothing really wrong with that as long as we are following God for just Him being God and
Right.
obeying God because He's God and we're not, and allowing Him to kind of open those doors rather than us trying kicking doors open when it's either
Right.
not
Right.
time for that door to be open or that door is
Right.
not meant to be open at all for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I had an experience last year, and this is crazy because it actually came right before I found out I was going to be leading at NAYC. And I'd gone to an event where there were going to be some other, it's an apostolic event. There were going to be other people there that I was thinking this might be a great chance to network. I'm always looking for other songwriters to write with and try to build that community of songwriters, things like that. And I thought this is going to be great, that I'm going to network with some people. And so I go to this event and I felt almost unwelcome in certain places. And there, who knows what the reasons are for that. Not going to, I'm not really worried about that aspect of it, but I was just praying about it to the Lord and was like, I don't really feel like I'm welcome at the table. And that was kind of the way I was thinking. And but I was like, Lord, I'm not going to elbow my way in, for a seat at the table, right? And so this is me thinking in myself. And the Lord said to me, whoo, and I was just, it was such like he just righted me, okay? And he said, you might not want to sit at that table. I might not be at that table. And I'm like, Jesus, you just put me at whatever table that you're at. I don't want to be at any table that you aren't sitting at. So it was just kind of like the Lord reminding me, you think you might know where you want to be and where you want to connect, and you think you know who you need to network with, but you let me do that because you don't even know about those situations. You don't even know what's going on in those people's lives. And maybe you don't want to be at that table. Maybe there's destruction at that table. And I'm not saying that about anybody, but I'm saying the Lord reminded me, you let me work it because I know what table that you at, and you want to be wherever I want you to be. So I just was like, whoo, okay, hands off. And then
Yeah.
thinking, all right, Lord, whatever you want to do. And then, of course, a couple weeks later, I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to be at NAYC. That's where I'm going to be. But God is good. He just
Right.
has a way of working things out in the right timing when we have completely submitted ourselves to Him.
Hmm. I mean, he gave you a totally different table, that's for sure.
He
Um,
did. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so kind of along, not to take a negative route or anything like that, but I do think sometimes we we kind of like glaze over this part. But what is something that you think that we usually get wrong as believers when we think about the call of God? Like, what is something that we maybe don't have a full grasp about?
I think that one of the things that we get wrong, this is just one thing I see us getting wrong, is that we think of the call of God as a public ministry, and something that we're going to do publicly. And that's sort of tip of the iceberg. The call of God, I think, is all the other stuff underneath the water. Like there's so many, it's a call from him. Brother DJ Hill's message, on Wednesday night, called to pay the price. We're called to be holy. We're called to be like him. We're called to put away ourselves. We're called to die out to ourselves, we must decrease and he must increase. That's really the call of God. And so I think we focus on the call as a public position or role that we're serving in the church. And we think of that as God's call when really his call is so much deeper than that. And our ability to serve in those positions is impacted so greatly by how we're responding to his call in other ways, his call to holiness, his call to bear the fruit of the Spirit. If you don't have those things, then you're not going to be serving effectively in any role that you have. So I think what we get wrong about it is sometimes that we look at it as, oh, God's calling me to pastor a church. But that's just a position, you know, um, at a church. It's a powerful position, but there are so many other ways that God's calling us to be used that go beyond a worship leader position or, serving at an event or doing all those other things. The call goes beyond that. And I think the call also as a young person, I remember like, oh, okay, God, what am I called to do? We want there to be something tangible that we're called to do. And it's not that easy. It's not that easy. We're called to serve him in whatever way. And I think once you really lock into that, if you can get a hold of his call to be holy, his call to know him, his call to be in communion with him, his call to meet him, when you get that, then all this other stuff happens because you got the main thing figured out. So if I could give that to anybody, then I would say, get that call right. Get the call to Jesus right. And then everything else will fall into place.
Right. Yeah. That's very, very true. And I do think that there is a generation who is starting to understand that. Um, NAYC has just reiterated that to me. What I kind of have already known is that there is a generation of young people who truly love God, and they are
Yes.
sold out to the Lord, and they're not being distracted by social media and
Right.
Hollywood and
Right.
celebrities and all of the other junk that's out there. And not like there's anything wrong with entertainment, but that can be such a distraction from
Absolutely.
just your original
Absolutely.
calling to serve the Lord. It can be a distraction of your talents and what God has given you, and you might think you can use that in a different space than what God has called you to. Um, and I'm so encouraged by uh, just the different testimonies that I've seen since NAYC of young people going out, stepping out, and witnessing in
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
uncommon pulpits and
Yeah.
just
Oh, yeah.
loving on people the way God wants them to love on people. And, I know that we have a lot of fear sometimes as if we're older and we're looking at the younger generation, but the Lord has not given us a spirit of fear. We have to have this
Right.
hope, and we have to be, just encouraging and just be inspired by the Lord and what He's doing, and
Right.
recognize that God is not done. And
No.
there may be some that might fall away, and we grieve for those, and we pray for them. But we're going to keep our vision high, and we're going to keep moving forward, and we're not going to,
Man, yes.
you
Yes.
know, just be under that heaviness of, the church is not going to have a victory, because we know the end of the story. The church will, because Jesus does have victory.
Yes, absolutely. We already know that.
We already
He's got
know.
the victory.
So, can you please just take a few minutes to encourage someone listening who is hesitant to pursue the call of God, to pursue maybe that servanthood or whatever the Lord has asked them to do? What would you say to them?
I would say, obviously, go after that call. If God is calling you, what I have found is that when we want to know real peace, when we want to know real rest in Him, it's found in obedience. And so when we're not obeying what God has given us to do, even like I mentioned earlier, I felt convicted. I would lay in bed at night thinking about standing before God and Him saying, "But what about those songs?" And what that took on my part was obedience. And yeah, God had to open up the right opportunities, and I'm grateful that He did. But honestly, those right opportunities came as a result of prayers that I was praying. I began to pray, God, put my songs in the right hands at the right time. And so the opportunities came as a result of those prayers that I prayed because it was important to me to be obedient. And I think obedience, um, the word says obedience is better than sacrifice. Whatever that we may do for God, if we're missing the thing He's asked us to do, sometimes it's very simple. Sometimes it's just the call to be holy, right? Sometimes it's just the whole duty of man, to live for Him and to serve Him and love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, soul, and strength. We can't, gloss over that being our call because that is our call. But when God does give you something specific to do, I think obedience is is really powerful because I will speak from my personal experience. I was so scared to put out music. It's very vulnerable to pour your heart and blood, sweat, and tears and a lot of money into recording something that is your song and it's your voice. And now it's out there and people can be like, I don't really care for it, or no, man, what was she thinking? Or, it's very vulnerable to put yourself out there. And probably as a podcaster, you feel this too, that it's really vulnerable to open yourself up to that. And it's that vulnerable place where we're being obedient. And even just, and this may seem comical, but it took me a while to release some of my songs because I could not find the right cover art because I was really self-conscious about my face being out there on, on digital streaming and just like, what do I want to put out there? It was something I really had to pray about. And God really had to work on me through my insecurities with that, to be obedient. So that is one of the words that I've just keep bringing myself back to is God, I want to be obedient. And I don't know if you've listened to the Youth MSC put out several songs. We did some of them at NAYC. I Won't Give Up and Take Control, Calling Me to Holy. And I got to be part of writing some of those songs, which is a really cool process. Well, there's a song on there called Speak, O Lord. And it's just kind of a little, almost like just a moment, like a little sacred moment that's in there. And there's a line in that I had submitted into the writing session. And because out of an experience that God had dealt with me, I hope I'm not taking too long right here, but I was reading with my girls out of the story of Samuel. And this was back in the spring. Oh, and the Lord he convicted me. I just felt such conviction in it because it said that Samuel did not let one word fall to the ground. The word of God was so precious to him that he did not let one word fall to the ground. And I thought, oh my God, you've given me so many things to do. And I've just like, it's almost like I can't hold them in my hands and they're just falling to the ground. And so the line that I submitted was, I won't let one word fall to the ground. Speak, Lord. I won't let one word fall to the ground. That's obedience when we say, God, you've asked me to do this and it's precious to me because you've asked me to do this. And I'm going to be obedient in spite of the vulnerability that it's going to require, in spite of it costing me something, personally, financially, in spite of having to deal with insecurities and, pride and any other issues like that. I'm going to be obedient to what you've asked me to do. So if God's calling you to something, that is my encouragement to you. Obey what God is asking you to do. Yes, confirm it in prayer, confirm it with his word, confirm it with your pastor. Make sure that you have wisdom in your life and counsel in your life to help lead you and guide you. But all of those things being on board with what God has called you to do, be obedient, even when it's scary and even when it's vulnerable.
Amen. I second that. And yes, you know, when God, wanted me to do this podcast, the first thing I said was, I don't want to hear my voice.
Right. Oh,
Um,
same.
And that's the
Yes.
same even when I feel, we've talked before we started recording, there's some songs that I've written and I had some really bad health problems and I'm now starting to get some of my voice back and hitting some of the notes that I used to hit before. Um, and it's so vulnerable. It's so
Yes.
vulnerable when you're
Yes.
just putting something out there to be critiqued and looked at and torn apart. But at the end of the day, I mean, you're really pleasing the Lord, and the
Right.
benefits far outweigh, the negatives.
Absolutely.
And it
Absolutely.
it just
Absolutely.
it all matters.
Yes. And when I hear, I'm sure that there are people who have heard my songs and be like, I don't really care for it or whatever. I mean, thankfully they don't let me know those things. I don't get a lot of
Yeah.
that feedback from people. But the feedback, when people have reached out to me and said, I listened to this song when I was going through, this situation and it ministered to me and, this song carried me and through this situation, or when you hear people saying, when I was listening to this song, like I just connected with it and I felt the presence of the Lord. And you're like, okay, this is what God wanted to do. And this is why
Yes.
obedience matters, is because even in spite of criticism, even in spite of what it cost us, and from a vulnerability standpoint, even in spite of all that, God has something he wants to do. And that obedience is powerful because God can do the thing. When I first released music in 2021, I released 4 songs, and Spotify gives you this end of the year, wrapped. They give you
Yeah.
this report. And in 2021, my songs had been played in over 150 countries. And I just, I felt like, God, that was so much bigger than anything I ever thought I would ever do. That's
Yeah.
so much bigger than what I thought you were going to do through this. That one of those songs, No Other God But Him, there's a line in it that says, Jesus, your name is power. And I prayed over that line that people like the power would be felt, wherever people
Yeah.
heard that, and thinking that song's been played in countries where most people don't know the name of Jesus, and
Hmm.
I'm getting to declare the name of Jesus all over the world. And that's part of what he wanted to do. He wanted his name declared. And I was obedient, and I got to be part of that happening. So God has something to do that is going to be tremendous. And although I'll say this with releasing music, and maybe it's this way in the podcasting world as well, because I've never done that aspect of it, but I know that there are people who are listening to my songs who are blessed and who are encouraged, and I will never know who they are, and I will never know what happened for them. I will never know how God touched them, and that's okay. I
Yeah.
will never know the blessing that it may have been to them, but God did with it what he wanted to do with it,
Hmm.
and that's what matters. So obedience
Right.
is key.
Sister Angie, thank you so much for sharing your heart with me today on the podcast. I appreciate everything that you've shared. God truly did show up in this, and I would love it if you can just let everybody know where they could follow you and your church online.
Well, I'm not very active on social media. I'm going to try to do better, but you can find me on Facebook. My personal account is Angie Blanton Pearson. So that's got my middle name or my maiden name in there. And our church is High Point Apostolic Church, and we're in Winchester, Kentucky. We do have a Facebook presence. On Instagram, I'm Lady Soul, Ladysoul, and there's a long story behind that name, but I've been on Instagram for 15 years, and so I'm probably not going to change it now. But you can find me there, although I'm not super active on Instagram. But as far as my songs are available on all streaming platforms. So if you just go look up Angie Pearson, Pearson is Pearson. You can find me on, Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, all of the digital streaming sites. I have 8 songs out. And so I appreciate if you go check those out. If you're on Spotify and you want to go follow me on Spotify, that way you see if I have new songs that come out. That would be great. And I do have new songs I want to record. I'm just praying that God will give me provision and direction for those. So hopefully next year I'll be releasing some new music.
All exciting things. I cannot wait. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure and a blessing. Thank you so much.